Hey everyone, Elisa Bloom here. Welcome to this Eat Outside the Box 4-day kickstart to ditch processed foods. Before we get started, I want to take care of a few housekeeping details. When you signed up for the kickstart, you received a workbook and some recipes. The recipes aren't a specific meal plan to follow along for the 4 days. They're some recipes to give you ideas of how to eat outside the box. Use the workbook to follow along, jot down your questions, write down your goals, things that you've learned. And the workbook and the recipes are not mandatory for this Kickstart. Join in anyway. But if for some reason you'd still like them, go ahead and sign up at the link, liveyourbest365.com/kickstart. That's liveyourbest365.com/kickstart. As you have your questions throughout the day, feel free to email me, Alisa@liveyourbest365.com, or reply to any of the Kickstart emails. But please put in the subject heading, Kickstart Question, and I can recognize them. I'll be in here every morning with a video, like today, through Thursday, where I'll give you the information, set you up with your homework assignment for the day so you can run off and go implement. And if you have those questions, I will be back each afternoon at 4 p.m. Central to answer them. I'm going to be holding a relatively quick, short 15 to 20 minute Q&A session to answer your questions and certainly to help make this easier along the way. So why did I choose processed foods that if we target will make an impact like I claim? The truth is processed foods are the largest source of sodium, preservatives, and something called an excitotoxin in the diet. Those three things, how they affect the body and the brain, have such an impact that if we can take them away, you'll notice something within 4 days. So let's start with processed foods and sodium. 70% of the sodium in American diets is from processed foods. 70%. So if you have an issue with taking out some sodium, whether it's for high blood pressure or simply to take off some water or to feel better and have better mental clarity, because that is affected by too much sodium, you just take away the processed foods in your diet. Processed foods are also another big source of preservatives. Preservatives are those things that you can't recognize, don't know how to pronounce, or don't want to. They're on labels of boxes and bottles in the form of BHT, tricalcium phosphate, sodium metabisulfite, generally those types of words. And if we break those words down, sodium metabisulfite, that has sodium in it. So that's a preservative that adds to the sodium content of the food. Something like a tricalcium phosphate, that word phos, P-H-O-S, or the prefix are in there, is for phosphorus. And those phosphorus and phosphates act on the kidneys. So they tax the kidneys. You can already see how taking out these processed foods are definitely better for your body. Also in processed foods, commonly as aspartame and monosodium glutamate, or MSG, those two are called excitotoxins. And basically, they enhance the taste receptors on our tongues to make food taste better. Those also affect the brain. They're so exciting and stimulatory to the brain that they're killing off neurons. We don't want those very often. Also, those are in processed foods. So you can see already that you don't have to be so extreme with other types of diets or fads that may or may not work for you. The goal that I like to have with people is to find something realistic that you can do for yourself long term. And when we think about taking away processed foods, the foods that we're reaching for to eat in a processed food. So if it's a donut that's in a box, you could make that donut by yourself or another way to have it not have all those preservatives or the extra sodium. And yes, it would still be a higher source of fat and sugar and calories, but it wouldn't do all those other things that processed food does. So when we think about making lifestyle changes, if the more extreme that you're going to go, If you're on something, then you're so restrictive that if you go off of it, you end up being all the way out here. If we can find something that mirrors your current diet somewhat, that when you're on it, you're over here, and when you're off it, you're over here. If we can narrow that gap, that's when you have a better chance of making a long-term change. So, what do we want to start with? We want to make one meal unprocessed. What does that look like? Well, if you choose breakfast, for example, breakfast could be oatmeal. That's okay because it might come in a box or a bag, excuse me, but you only want the oats in there, nothing else. So you could do oats, you can do eggs. This is not a plant-based or vegan approach. It's not a keto approach. It's just simply eating outside the box. So you can have an omelet with vegetables. You can have oatmeal. You can do an overnight oat. I will be putting some recipes throughout the 4 days, just around in the Facebook group, so you can take a look. That would be what breakfast would look like. When we think about lunch or dinner, we're thinking about maybe isolating a protein source like salmon or tofu or chicken, and you can add a vegetable to it. It doesn't have to be plain though. So don't think that you just have to sit in a corner with a plain vegetable and a piece of boiled chicken. Don't have to do that. Every time that you grab for a box, or my particular weakness are the bottles of seasonings. So maybe I will commonly take a vegetable and add some sort of seasoning to it. And I do have a few in my house that have more preservatives than I should be having. So I'm going to join with you this week by taking care of those. And as a result of that, I'm going to have some salad dressing recipes for you that are basic vinaigrettes that you could add on top of your salads, because that's a common place where people run into processed foods and mostly the preservatives and the sodium that way. So your assignment today is to choose one meal that you will eat outside the box. And if you have any questions, please email me, Elisa@liveyourbest365.com. Use the subject heading, Kickstart Question, and I will be back here this afternoon at 4 p.m. Central to answer your questions. And during the week, we're going to talk more and more about how processed foods affect your body and what benefits you have when you continue to build upon what we're going to do today. So one meal, choose that. What's it going to be? Do you know yet? If you do, write it down. And I will answer your questions. I'll be back this afternoon at 4 p.m. Central to answer any questions. Have a good day.